Kevin De Leon, welcome. We have been watching these concerning scenes from the streets of LA. Can you give us a sense of what's been happening on the ground there?
Well, as you can imagine, David, it's been quite difficult. It has been very challenging. We have hundreds, if not, we have thousands of individuals in the city streets of Los Angeles, city of LA, and in downtown Los Angeles in particular, blocking the 101 Hollywood freeway, the famous freeway. We have confrontations with federal agents as well as the National Guard, LAPD, and California Highway Patrol. So suffice it to say, it is not a pretty moment in the great golden state of California.
Just in relation to those various law enforcement agencies, we know Donald Trump has deployed the National Guard, and he's done this without the approval of the California governor, and this hasn't happened in decades, as I understand, in the United States. Are those National Guard troops actually being engaged in dealing with the demonstrations, or is it other law enforcement officials at this stage?
Well, it's a whole combination of various law enforcement agencies from both the local, that being Los Angeles Police Department, as well as the LA County Sheriff's Department, from the state, the California Highway Patrol, but also federal agents as well, whether it be the FBI, Homeland Security, and ICE patrol agents, as well as the National Guard. Let me emphasize one thing to your point. The National Guard, albeit it's a misnomer, the National Guard, the legal authorization is under subnational governments. For example, the National Guard actually belongs to the state of California. And the one who has the sole authority is the governor of California, that being Gavin Newsom. However, in this case, there's only one individual who has the ability to usurp the state authority, and that is, in this case, the President of the United States. In this case, it is Donald Trump. So Donald Trump has usurped Governor Gavin Newsom's power and authorized the National Guard to enter the city streets of Los Angeles.
And clearly you believe that is an inflammatory move from the president. I think you've described this as Donald Trump trying to orchestrate a crisis. Why do you think the president wants to orchestrate a crisis?
Well, let me be very clear here. Every nation in the world has a right to protect its own sovereignty when it comes to the issue of immigration. That being said, immigration is a federal issue. It's not a subnational or a local issue. We understand that. We understand if you're in the country as an undocumented immigrant, that federal authorities have a right to detain and eventually deport you. However, that being said, the very fact that they're sending federal agents into communities, provoking communities, using tear gas and other types of weapons to instill fear, and utilizing these types of tactics is spreading and creating chaos throughout the city and throughout the county of Los Angeles. Like I said in my statement, I don't believe that President Trump, as well as his cronies, Stephen Miller to be specific, is actually responding to a crisis. They're actually manufacturing a crisis to create the scenario and the conditions to have the National Guard enter the premises. He wants to create chaos in a state that he despises, which is the state of California.
Well, the scenes we're seeing in LA are the worst of it, but we are also seeing some protest and confrontation between demonstrators and federal immigration officials in other parts of the country now. Is what we're witnessing likely to be a darker, more violent chapter in the divisions that we've been witnessing politically in the United States?
It doesn't make a difference if you're Republican or Democrat. When there's a transfer of political power, we respect the sanctity of the vote. That being said, given that we're only 5-6 months now into the presidency of Donald J. Trump, we've been on the cusp on several occasions of a constitutional crisis. Now we're seeing mayhem across the country, but especially it's acute in the city of Los Angeles. Let me emphasize one thing, too, which is really important. There is no justification at all whatsoever for any type of violence from any protesters. And I recognize there are certain protesters that are embedded with the mass amount of crowds who are inciting and also confronting the federal agents. We want to make sure that Angelinos are safe and there's no justification. But that being said, we're going into a very dark chapter in the United States. I'm worried for Californians. I'm worried for the rest of America as well as the world.
Let me come to the sanctuary law, Kevin De Leon, that you wrote when you were in the state legislature. This is a law that Donald Trump wants to dismantle. How does this sanctuary law offer protection to immigrants?
Yes, I wrote the sanctuary state law, making California the first and largest state in the nation to declare itself a sanctuary state. I wrote it with the former Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, who used to be the Attorney General for then President Barack Obama. It's very clear. We don't prohibit the federal immigration authorities from executing federal immigration laws. What we do with sanctuary state is we say we cannot allow local tax dollars, state tax dollars to be utilized to enforce federal immigration laws. It's that simple. Whether it's local police department, LA, San Diego, San Francisco, Fresno, Bakersfield, for example, the California Highway Patrol or the county sheriffs, they can't collaborate or cooperate with the federal authorities in enforcing immigration law. One of the reasons we wanted and we needed to do that was to make sure that our local law enforcement agencies were not co-opted by the federal authorities, in this case, by Donald J. Trump. Now, I know Donald J. Trump does not like that, and he's trying to usurp that law, but it is constitutional, and that's why, because we respect and we value the diversity of immigrants, helping make California the fourth largest economy on planet Earth.
But that law, of course, can't stop the federal immigration officials enforcing federal
correct.
law and the raids that they've been conducting. What is it about? And clearly, you know, this was a big part of Donald Trump's campaign, and he won that election, promising to get tough on immigration. What is it about the raids, though, in recent times that have triggered this sort of reaction on the streets?
Well, these raids are very different. Usually when they've had raids, immigration authorities, they have gone to homes with arrest warrants approved and authorized by an administrative immigration judge. So an individual who's a felon, an individual who perhaps was a hardened criminal, a rapist or murderer. Nothing. I'm not against that at all whatsoever. Or at times they've had a workplace raids. But in this case, they're going into communities heavily impacted by Latino communities in particular. They're cruising around elementary schools. They're going around churches. They're going around public, schools. And that is just something that's un-American, un-Californian. And I think that it really has shocked the consciousness of so many Californians that he could be so brazen in going into public schools, going to nursery daycare centers, places where children are waiting for their mothers to pick them up. And all of a sudden the mother's not there because the mother has been detained by ICE agents.
Finally, Kevin De Leon, you've faced your own political setbacks over the years, including a censure at LA City Council over a racism scandal there. Do you fear that some may still question whether you genuinely understand social cohesion in LA?
Well, let me tell you, let me deal with the false narrative. That was a completely false narrative and not based on facts. And that is part of a culture where we start canceling folks without facts, without knowing and understanding the context of what really took place. When folks conflate the comments from other issues, from other individuals, I should say, and they attribute to me or to other individuals. That's the world that we live in when we deal with algorithms and when we deal without no balance when it comes to checks, and balances. That's unfortunate. Nonetheless, I stand on my record, who I am as the author of Sanctuary State and what my values are as a diverse person, as the youngest child of a single immigrant mother with a third grade education. It is something that I have always valued and I always will.
All right, Kevin De Leon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Hello to all my fellow Australians.